Well, hello everybody and welcome from Miami. I was going to say sunny Miami, but it's been incredibly cloudy. Of course, nice weather. It's sort of 24, 25 up to 27 degrees Celsius, whatever that is in Fahrenheit. But very cloudy. So I'm here in my hotel. I'm actually staying at the Intercontinental, and I have a great view over, I think it's called an ocean view. I originally booked a partial ocean view, and I got upgraded to an ocean view, which is very nice. So maybe I should swing around and show you. I don't know that you can really see very much, but because a couple of ships started to have left. So we had Carnival in today, Horizon, we had Norwegian Joy, we had MSC Seascape, which is still here, and then Icon of the Seas is in. So I made a point of actually heading off the road that heads down if you go to South Beach, so I could actually take a look at Icon of the Seas. So that was good. So here I am. I'll do a bit of housekeeping bits and pieces. Just a reminder, if you're going to ask a question, write the word question, because it's easier for me to spot. But maybe I'll do a few bits of housekeeping, a bit of introductions about what's going on, what I'm doing, why I'm in Miami, and then we'll get into the many questions. So of course, I'm doing this at a very different time. It's sort of 5 hours later than I would normally do it. So I'll be interested to see how many people join, whether this time works better or worse for people, or whether it just throws people off because I'm doing it this time. So why am I in Miami? Well, I'm here because I'm doing two cruises, two back-to-back cruises on two very different cruise lines. So tomorrow I head up to Fort Lauderdale and I'm boarding Symphony of the Seas, going to Labadee in Haiti, which of course is everything's been kicking off in Haiti. There was gunshots fired at the airport and blah de blah. But of course, Labadee is sort of their private island. Heading to Jamaica, which of course the US government increased the travel advice against. And then to Nassau, Bahamas, which the US government also increased the travel advice again. So an interesting choice. Anyway, I'm on Symphony of the Seas, which will be very interesting because of course it's spring break time, so it could be completely manic. So it'll be interesting to see whether it's even crazier than my experience in the Med. Then next Saturday, so a week today, I board Norwegian Oceania Vista, which I'm very excited about, to try their new ship. And we're doing a very classic sort of Western Mediterranean, so Eurotan, Harvest Key, Costa Cozumel. Those of you who are patrons or members, I will try and post sort of the bonus content that I normally do. Both of those have sort of Starlink kind of Wi-Fi, so hopefully I will be able to post member and patrons updates. This week's video, I'll do another plug and then we'll get some of the questions. This week's video asks 6 things polite cruisers do that drive cruise crew crazy. The advantage of doing the actual live at this time is it's already been out for a couple of hours. It's doing really well. It's very popular, causing lots of discussion. So if you haven't watched that and you want to get a bit more of me, take a look at that perhaps afterwards and see if that raises the same kind of issues. So as I said, the theme was going to be Caribbean cruising. I can see from the questions coming in, no one's interested at all in Caribbean cruising in the questions, which is perfectly fine, because of course I'm here to answer the questions that you want to answer. So we'll go through for the next hour and let's get going. So Hetty's here, Claudia's here, which is great. So Moomin asked me if the weather's better. So the weather is better, obviously, in terms of temperature-wise, very cloudy. And yes, thank you for asking about my mum's afternoon tea. It was really, really fantastic. It was great. I had made a little video actually of pictures going right back to when my mum was very young and everyone had a good old cry, but in a good way. Warren, do you get more excited about going on a cruise or coming home after a long cruise? Absolutely, going on a cruise gets most excited because often I'm doing things like trying a new cruise line, trying a new destination, and all that kind of stuff. So I get very excited about that. What am I going to be talking about? What do people want me to talk about? New things I'm trying. So I'm always very excited about it. So even though I'm apprehensive about heading up on Symphony again, I'm still excited about it. What's it going to be like? It's going to be different. What's it going to be like actually in the Caribbean? Because these sort of ships are really designed for that. So I find coming home particularly from a long cruise, I found kind of very anticlimactic in a way. I feel very like, and also because there's not a lot of work to be done, to be honest, because I've got all these hundreds of clips to sort out, scripts to finish off, video to do. So it's kind of back to reality. Claudia asking a question about Queen Anne. So their third cruise, you're right. So they're doing the maiden cruise, which is to Lisbon. Then they're doing the cruise that I'm on, which is the 2-week Canary Islands. Then they're doing the UK islands at the naming ceremony. I think it will be, I mean, going around the UK, I personally don't find wildly exciting, mostly because I know many of the places, and I kind of, so it's kind of more familiar territory. Obviously, for people who don't go to the UK, it's a really nice combination because you'll see parts of Ireland, which, by the way, is a little aside, Claudia and everybody else. I've seen lots of discussions recently where the Irish are very upset. So my glasses are all crooked. I think I was sat on my glasses or something. I realized looking at this, they're very crooked. Get new glasses. It's going to bug you now because I've pointed it out. Because these cruises are called British Isles cruises, but most of them will often go to Ireland. So they will go to Southern Ireland, or Ireland, in the south of Ireland, so Ireland, country Ireland, rather than Northern Ireland, and it should really be called British Isles and Ireland. And I've seen lots of discussion about that recently. Anyway, so I think it'll be there'll be a real buzz on that cruise, because I think people who really want to be part of that experience will be on it. So I think it'll be the buzz on it. Also, the advantage, of course, going a little bit later is hopefully the ship will have bedded in and run much better. Now, I'm sure I massacred your name last week, so I hope you probably should let me know how to pronounce your name. So, Marjovi, what are your thoughts on dress codes in the main dining room? Do you think cruise lines should be more strict reinforcement? This is always, of course, one of those topics that always divides people enormously. My personal view is if a cruise line has a dress code, they should enforce it, or they shouldn't have a dress code. So if there's a dress code, they should enforce it. So, for example, on Silversea recently, Silversea still has one of the strictest dress codes, in that they still have 3 dress codes. They have casual, which is kind of, I could get away with this sort of shirt on. Should I show you the shirt? Just, sort of like a polo shirt and some slacks. I couldn't really wear jeans. Then they had their sort of smart evening, which was gentlemen could wear a jacket, could be a sports jacket and slacks, whatever, didn't have to be a tie. And then they had their formal night, which was supposed to be tuxedos, jacket and tie, that kind of stuff. And they were pretty strict about it. Cunard, of course, have 2 dress codes. They're smart casual and they're sort of more formal night. I sort of feel if you're going to have a dress code, enforce it, or just don't have one. And I think a lot of cruise lines are still hovering in that middle ground. What's going to be very interesting is Oceania. They sort of have a dress code, but they just call this broad brush country casual, which in reality, if you read it, you can get away with a good, smart pair of jeans with. But then you get that big kind of variation. So I found, for example, in Oceania, when I've been in the Caribbean, for example, people tend to dress more casually because, normally it's hot and whatever. When I've been on more Northern Europe cruises, people dress up more smartly, but it's very vague into that. So I think if you're going to have it, have it. If you're not going to have it, then don't have it. That's my view. Hikers here, which good to see. Ken, good to see you here. So Ken, doing you're staying up later. So lots of people out in the UK were like, I'm not joining you today because it's 10 o'clock at night and I'm going to bed. Including Mark, I think, was going to do that. So I don't know if Mark did eventually join, but I did before this, I said goodnight to him. So I'm assuming he's gone to bed. Anyway, Ken, I'll be interested how you find Vista and the new American themed restaurant compared to Jacques, as you'll be on her next year. So yes, I'm very interested about, actually at the moment, Ken, I have no specialty bookings. I think I mentioned it last week. Did I mention it last week? Where I had not gone in right when it opened, because it opened over Boxing Day or something like that. I was in Australia and time zone stuff, and I only went in about a week later, and I couldn't get table for myself until 9:30 at night, which I just not going to eat at 9:30 at night. So I'm hoping once I get on board, I'm going to be able to sort out specialty dining. And one of the reasons I tend to try and get a table by myself, because I want to film. I tend to get through stuff quite quickly, because I do also want to get on and experience and video things, and sort out all my video clips and things. Sorry, I'm going to drive you crazy. I'm driving myself crazy now with my glasses. So hopefully I will get those and let you know. And it's interesting because I've had quite a few people contact me with different views about the restaurants they like and don't like. It's going to be very interesting, as you say. I'm really, really excited. I've been watching lots of videos on that, on Vista as well. And I'm very excited because I'd forgotten that I'd actually booked, I thought I'd booked a balcony cabin. I can't remember the level, concierge, which is the one where you get some perks. And I actually realized I booked a penthouse one, the low grade of penthouse. So that will be also interesting to see and experience some of those kind of extra perks. So I'm hoping maybe that gives me a little leverage with the specialty dining. Dolly's here, which is great. I'd got a message from Dolly just before. I said I'll update to patrons, and Dolly was going to see if she could. We're going to join, so it's great to see that you join. So Ken's got just a sort of follow-up question on one of the topics we spoke about, which is Sun Princess. For those of you who don't know, Sun Princess came out late. They cancelled the original Maiden. Then they had the next one, and they literally told people 3 days before. And now they did actually this week sale with their now new Maiden. So often you find, I never book Maiden voyages. If you book further down, you sometimes find yourself by default Maiden. So what do you think of the way Princess have treated the passengers on Sun Princess? And should they have cancelled the first 2 cruises well in advance, rather causing them stress and anguish? Well, it's very interesting, Ken, because you might have seen that Royal Caribbean with, I've forgotten what it's called now. What's the follow-up to Icon? Why have I forgotten its name? Anyway, the ship that's in the second sister ship, which is of Icon, they've already announced probably 9 months before that they're cancelling the maiden voyage because they can know the ships are going to be ready. I sort of feel personally that cruise lines should be more conservative. I know they need to try and make plans, but in reality, if the ship is ready early, they could probably put it on sale early, which is what I think Oceania did with Vista. They had originally planned some media trips, and the ship was ready, so they could do the shakedown cruises early. They often bring media on to do the shakedown cruise, to help iron out some bugs and things. And it was ready. They canceled the media and they put it on sale, and they sold out. So I always sort of feel it wouldn't be a bad idea to set a more conservative maiden voyage, and if the ship's ready, and early sell it. Because in reality, I know people are really obsessed with going on maiden voyages, but people should really know that you're not the first person to sleep in that bed. You're not the first person to stay in that cabin, because cruise lines do shakedown cruises. They do shakedown cruises normally with employees and stuff, and then they do shakedown cruises with travel agents and media and stuff, and then they do the maiden. So whilst you're officially on the first, you're the first passenger who's paid to stay in that cabin. But I know for a lot of people, it's a big deal. So, it's just, I'd see it less so. But anyway, so I do feel that they should do. I think also, you're right, the compensation was pretty ropey, particularly because it was so late. A lot of people would have traveled very far. But there was another line recently that it did the same. And I think they'd only offered 200 or something. I was watching a video yesterday around that as well. Leslie, hi Leslie, good to see you. What classes of cabin have you chosen for your 2 Caribbean cruises? So I've partly answered that. So Leslie, I've got the penthouse, which I'm very excited about because I'd forgotten that I had pushed my boat out, terrible pun, and gone penthouse, which normally when I've been, I've either had a balcony cabin or concierge level cabin. On the Symphony of the Seas, I've actually booked, I've booked in a suite because to go on a massive big ship like that, I want to have the spaces to escape. So I want to have the coastal kitchen, the lounge, and they have a separate deck, although the separate deck is pretty loud and boisterous because it's right over the pool deck. But in the suite, they have 3 grades of suite. They have C grade, SEA, which is sort of the mini suites, and they have limited access to some of those facilities. So they don't have access to the deck, for example, and they do have access to coastal kitchen for dinner, subject to availability. I've booked a Sky grade, which guarantees that you can use coastal kitchen for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You can use a lounge at all times. So you can have, they have like a happy hour. It's more than an hour where they have snacks, and then they do include drinks for that. Then they have Star, which is the level where you get the genie the butler. You get better seats reserved. You get special dining. You get gratuities and so on. That's sort of included. So I've booked that middle grade level, and that's what I had last time. Now, I had originally booked Symphony of the Seas. This was going to be my time to cover Royal Caribbean Symphony Seas. I ended up slotting in that the other one. So that's what I'm doing on that one. I don't think I would cope not having some escape, to be honest. Love Travel, do you think that Holland can keep up with all these new cruise ships that other lines are coming out? Love Travel, I think they sort of can, in that they've got the Pinnacle class, which is pretty new. I know that came out sort of pre-pandemic and so on, but it's quite a nice class of ship. It's pretty new. It's a nice layout. So I think probably they can do. I mean, and also they sort of not going as big. So you're right, their competition is obviously Princess, which is going really big with the big ships. So Sun Princess is really big, and also is going, it's the first time they've really created that sort of ship within a ship. So they now have a suite restaurant and deck and all that sort of stuff, which they didn't really have as separate as before. You've got Cunard, obviously, which is bringing out Queen Anne, but Queen Anne is actually a Pinnacle class ship, which is pimped up with Cunard decor, but it's basically an adapted Pinnacle class ship. You've got Virgin, obviously, which has, I think they're pretty much done now with all the ships now. They've got the fourth one coming in. Disney is their other competition. So I think they're okay. I mean, you're right, but they have no kind of next generation. I'm hoping they're not going to keep going bigger. So I think they're probably okay. Don asking the question, if you saw that I'm staying at the Intercontinental, which I've never stayed at before, always wanted to stay here. Janice, getting ready to depart on Oceania Vista soon, will I be disappointed? So if you're departing soon, if you're actually going on the 9th, then I will be on the same cruise as you. So if that's when you are, please do say hello. I know that some of the reviews have been very mixed. People I've spoken to have enjoyed it. I've seen a couple of issues around. They feel that to watch out for. They feel the theatre isn't sort of what would be called, like stacked enough. So actually your line of sight is kind of blocked with people in front of you, and a few other little sort of design things, which hopefully in the second ship they will have adjusted. Suzette, this is my first chat in the group. Hi, good, thanks for that. I have 4 cruises booked until February 2026, all on Celebrity. We love the retreat, but are interested in your thoughts on Regent. Great, so that's very nice. The retreat on Celebrity is fantastic. So my video the week after next, I'm comparing all these kind of ship within a ship options. So Regent, I really do like Regent a lot. I mean, I like Silversea a lot. I like Regent a lot. So Regent is obviously quite a bit more costly than Celebrity, although depending which level in retreat you go, and once you add on all the add-ons, the price differential is not as great, but you won't get as big a cabin as you would for the same money on Celebrity. But I really do like Regent. I like the fact that it's a much smaller ship. You're talking about 700 passengers or 400 and something if you're on Navigator. Obviously, you've got all the inclusions. You've got your drinks included, which I guess you have if you're on retreat. But you have your excursions included. You have the Wi-Fi included. You have laundry included. And depending on where you're coming from, you have different flight levels. So if you're in the US, you will pretty much always have business class flights. My trips that I've got booked, I've got one with Mark and I doing, where you come to Miami and goes to LA. Out of the UK, you only have, and we're going to Penthouse in that one as well. You only have economy flights. I've actually just this week actually booked another Regent cruise. So again, but on Navigator, which is a long 3-week cruise, which goes from Barcelona all the way down the west coast of Africa to Cape Town. That's on the Navigator, which is 425 also passengers. So that's a good probably indication of how much I like Regent. I really like what they do. And again, some people who really like Silversea don't like Regent. Like I met a lot of people on Regent who much prefer, on Silversea who much preferred Regent, and vice versa. And my video next week is diving into Silversea, so that may help. And then I do have videos out on Regent. Solange, my husband, 3-year-old son, and I are leaving the UK and thinking of traveling home on a Cunard transatlantic. would you say that a normal balcony room is better than a sheltered balcony room? So Celine, this is actually one of the most discussed and argued about things on, you know, the sheltered balcony or the normal balcony. I think, Celine, the important thing to note in reality is pretty much on a transatlantic, you're not really going to use the balcony very much, particularly if you're using a winter one, it's just too cold and windy. But even in some of the summer ones, it's not always, you know, great in terms of sitting out on the balcony. So actually, you know, so you need to bear in mind, use of the balcony will not be enormous. Personally, I much prefer the normal balcony room. I like the glass window versus the metal. So with the sheltered balcony rooms, you know, they have, because you're in the metal hull, so it's cut out. So actually when you're looking out, you're looking, you know, you just have that gap and it's kind of metal underneath. If you're in a normal balcony, you can see out, and I actually just prefer that personally. So it's a little bit of personal choice, as it were. So even though you're not going to use the balcony a lot, I feel like the look out is just so much better. Sean, this is a question I've been asked fairly often. Havila, which people tell me off, I think because I don't pronounce correctly. Hopefully I've got that right. I'm very interested in that now. Emma Cruises has just done, she did a very short 4 nights on it. She's put a video out this week around her experience. Cruising with Amber has a very detailed one. She was on for longer than that, and she's got a very detailed dive into it. I'm very interested in them. I really want to try them. You know, they are the competitor to Hurtigruten. They do the same kind of, you know, basically work as a ferry, calling on port after port after port after port, and you can go as, you know, almost as a ferry without your car kind of thing, or you can do a more traditional cruise approach. I'm very interested in them. People seem pretty keen on them. They're obviously quite eco with their you know, electric and hybrid and stuff, and they seem to get pretty good reviews, and the cabins look pretty good. Malpac, I'm pretty prepared to pay what it costs for a solo trip in Queen Mary to Queen's Crawley. Thing with that is they do charge double. It's 100% if you go solo, so it's quite a hefty bit. Leslie, another question: do you just take carry-on for the Caribbean? Did you have to take much more luggage for your more formal Silver Seas African cruise? Leslie, I never cruise with carry-on ever. I did once set myself a goal of going with carry-on on a cruise and making a video about it. And I spent a lot of time working out what I was going to pack and so on. And I half made the video because I was making it kind of live, and I ditched it halfway through. I was about to head on a cruise. I was actually on a Mediterranean cruise at that time, but it was the middle of summer. So I don't do carry-on, partly because I like to take quite a lot of clothes, but also, to be honest with you, I also take a lot of stuff to make videos. So I take everything from, I mean, like this, like my little gorilla thing, but I also take a full tripod. I take my different cameras. I take lots of chargers. And so that pretty much fills up a whole suitcase anyway, and my rucksack. So I'm going to have to check, you know, I'm going to have to check stuff in anyway. So I actually normally take sort of a more medium-sized case and a smallish case. So I don't. And on this one, because I'm on for 2 weeks, and so I've also taken more stuff. So I just like to take more stuff, I think. So I like to take more clothes, even though I don't have to. But I actually took, to answer your question specifically, I've taken the same amount of suitcase space as I did for the South African cruise for this cruise. Because I think what happens, once you take a case, you pack until it's full. So even though I have packing lists in my head, I can pack quite whatever. But in reality, not so much, because the more formal thing, I had to take a jacket and I took a suit, which doesn't really take up that much space. What I'm very good at doing, or bad at doing, is I don't take many shoes. So I'll take a smart pair of shoes. I will take kind of boot type shoes that I wear on the plane. I take trainers and I take flip-flops. I don't take choice of shoes and things. So so that's probably, and that's one of the things that does take a lot of space. GG, as a Canadian, would I need a travel visa for the Greek Islands cruise? I would double check that, but depending on when you go, you shouldn't need it. However, the EU is introducing, it's been pushed back until after the Paris Olympics, but the EU are introducing a new, effectively like an ESTA. So, if people are going to Canada, you have to do the Canadian ESTA. If like move to fly into the US, I have to have an ESTA. The EU is introducing a similar thing. The UK is also introducing a similar thing. So depending on when you go, you're going to have that. So it's been pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. And France specifically asked them to push it back till after the Olympics. Now, I can't remember offhand whether it's coming in literally after the Olympics, or September, October, whether it's coming in 2025. So I would double check on the Canadian government travel website. So like in the US, it's the State Department. In the UK, it's the Foreign Office. Whatever your equivalent is, I would just double check that. But at some point, you're going to need one. And the simplest thing to be is just Google, Canadian, EU, e-visa, and that will tell you why. But you will be needing that soon. And any third country will need that. And it's going to be the same thing. It's going to be a small price that one has to pay. What I like about the US ESTA, and I think that's true of the EU ESTA, is it will last for some time. So like my US ESTA, I feel like it'll last 1 or 2 years. I know when Canadian one is much shorter, so I have to get my Canadian one every time I come into Canada, and when I'm coming back to Canada in June for my Alaska cruise. Jake, hi there, Jake. And besides a gratuity, what little trinket gifts that you can get crew? Mini box of chocolates, perhaps. So, Jake, one of the things that crew, this is a great question because it causes a lot of argument and discussion. And whenever I talk to crew, to be honest with you, they still prefer money because obviously that is the most flexible of everything. One of the things that does seem to be fairly popular, but it does need to depend on which route you're on and which ports you're going to. But one of the things that for most crew is one of their biggest challenges is Wi-Fi. Very few cruise lines give crew members sort of unfettered Wi-Fi. They might give them an hour a day, or they have to pay a certain amount, and often it's not streaming quality, which is why you'll always see so much crew heading out into the port, particularly if the port has Wi-Fi. So one of the things that is worth looking at, but again, you need to be very careful because it's very country specific. But if you are going to a particular country, something is an eSIM gift voucher, for example. So, for example, a lot of the crew that I was talking to when I was on the South African trip use Airlo, which is what I use if my roaming isn't free within the country. So I have a package where I think something like 60 countries I don't have to pay to use data, but a lot of them I do. So, for example, actually every country that I'm going to on this Caribbean cruise, other than the US, my roaming doesn't work. So in a couple of the ports I buy an eSIM with Airlo. Now, the advantage with an eSIM is you don't have to actually physically use a SIM. You can just download it. So that's one thing to think about, is giving them maybe some credit, because I think you can buy general credit on Airlo or some sort of thing which allows them to then be able to download and have data when they're in port is something. But you're right, often some treats, some chocolate and stuff is always fun and welcome, particularly if it's related to the place or where you're coming from. So when we did a Japan cruise, I didn't do the last one, but when Mark and I did a Japan cruise, Japan has this very beautiful confectionery, and the crew didn't really get out. So if we knew they weren't getting out to certain ports, sometimes we'll buy them this very beautiful Japanese confectionery, which they could then share with their friends and stuff. Oh, I love the Scary Beverages #2 fan. So that's interesting / scary. My mum is your #1 fan, haha. Transatlantic ends in Southampton on a Friday morning. Should I get a late disembarkation time to avoid crowded morning commuter trains, or does it not matter? So you're right. If you're getting the train, assume you're getting the train back to London, is that where you're heading back to? You're right, it can be pretty busy. Now, in reality, like a lot of countries, Friday is a day that a lot of people don't go to work. It's what they call twat, sort of a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Thursday. But in reality, if you're doing a Cunard or any of them, you're normally going to have to be off the ship by 9 anyway. It's because often they have to get people off by a certain time. So you're right, getting a little bit later and getting on a train a little bit later. In reality, a lot of those trains do get very busy because of the amount of people getting off the ship. So what I tend to do in reality is I tend to go really early. So at that time in the morning, some of the trains are only every hour, and then they go every half an hour, and then they go a little bit more frequently. So you also have to time it a little bit with that. So often I will get off as a self-disembark. So despite the fact I was saying to Leslie earlier that I take a lot of luggage, particularly something like that, if I'm only taking one suitcase or something that I know I can do, I get off really early, get the taxi, get to the train. So I'm actually getting on before the time. So you're right, it's kind of get there a little bit earlier or get there a little bit later. But the trains do get quite busy. The thing with the trains from Southampton is they're not designed to take luggage. So it's real pain when they're busy because you end up having to sort of stand in the doorway kind of stuff, which is not great. Fraser's here at 10 o'clock on Saturday night, so we just tell Fraser's a youngster. Well, I mean, Fraser, you are up at 10 o'clock at night, which is more than most of my friends who normally watch us. So, but yeah, it's good. So thanks for joining me. In fact, Fraser left a comment on my last week's video, which I haven't got around to replying to, Fraser. Through Magnificent, how is the security in the Caribbean? What about LGBTQ safety? So this is there's kind of two but linked issues. So in terms of security, a lot of that does hinge around where you're going, because some of the islands do have a reputation for a crime. It's not always necessarily related to cruise passengers or tourists, but some of them are. So even places like St. Lucia, Jamaica, I was mentioning earlier, Bahamas, Roatan, etc. So one of the things I think with many of these Caribbean ports, really important to stick in the heavy tourist areas, go on excursions. So it tends to be more if people are wandering off into places where there aren't lots of crowds. So that's one thing that I would always do. Now it's interesting in terms of the LGBTQ safety, because up until relatively recently, the Caribbean, many of the islands in the Caribbean, actually it was illegal to be gay. Now that has changed recently, and there is actually a site that tracks that. And people like Tom Daly, the Olympic diver from the UK, has been quite vocal around how many countries, for example, in the Commonwealth, being gay was still illegal. But it was interesting. I'd looked at that site because there was a discussion I had with Mark quite often, and quite a few countries have legalized it over the last not so long time period, even recently as up to pandemic time. Certainly I've never experienced anything specific. I think it's more a crime, the first part of the issue. So I think the rules sort of apply. Certainly, I still would be cautious in terms of kind of very public shows of affection. Mark always tells us I'm not really good at public shows of affection, no matter where I am anyway. But I would always just be cautious because it's still an evolving new situation. That's my perspective. Other people may have a very different perspective. Echo Bravo. Nice picture of Concord there. Saw your video on repositioned cruises. Thanks very much. And liked the idea. I really enjoy premium lines like Holland America, but I'm wondering if a big ship with more activities would be better plan. So that's a really interesting one. In reality, I mean, Holland America ships are pretty big, depending on which one you go. So if you were going to go on, the Pinnacle class ships, so Rotterdam, Koningsdam, Westerdam, kind of ships, they are quite big ships. There's quite a lot going on. Holland America would put on more activities, probably more enrichment focused kind of stuff. But if you're going to go on the big ships, you're talking, I guess, your big Norwegian ships or Caribbean ships, there are going to be more facilities and stuff on. But I think you'd find there's pretty much a lot going on. They're pretty good at adding extra stuff in. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. If you ever moved to the United States, what city would you likely call home? Okay, let's go remember how much you're a fan. Well, if I ever moved to the US, obviously Mark would have a massive influence over that. And Mark's place where he would absolutely love to live is Palm Springs. And we've spoken before about that. So I think it would probably need to be Palm Springs. I think I would find it difficult to go anywhere else. I personally really love Miami. I really do like Miami. And I also kind of like, I do sort of like the West Coast thing, but I also love Vegas. The advantage of being somewhere like Palm Springs, you can actually jump into like an hour flight to Vegas and stuff. There's lots of stuff around there. San Diego's close, Los Angeles is close. There's lots of stuff to go. But I think certainly if we move to the US, I think Mark would make sure that it was Palm Springs. Let's have a look. Mitzi Craft with friends. If you weren't a YouTuber, would you still use an Insta360 for yourself? How do you get good photos of yourself for yourself, not YouTube? Would I use an Insta360 for myself? That's a really interesting question. I probably wouldn't, in that I probably wouldn't. I'm not sure, because I'm not sure what I would do with the photos, I guess. You know, for those who don't know, I guess everyone knows what 360s. That's those, so you can get those really zooty pictures. I think if I was very active on Instagram, kind of stuff, I might do. But I find the 360 fantastic because I do travel solo a lot, and I can get those really good individual pictures of myself. And because you can't use drones, things, you can get great pictures. But I'm not sure I would, because they are relatively expensive, and I'm not sure I would get the amount of use out of them. I never really thought of that before. That's really interesting. How do you get good photos of yourself how do you get good photos of yourself for yourself, not YouTube? I don't like many of the pictures I take. I mean, in reality, I find my phone very good. I use the timer function on my phone quite a lot. So, you know, if you've got a little tripod, you know, a little kind of a little tripody kind of stand, and actually the timer. So often what I do increasingly, if I'm doing even for my thumbnails or whatever, I'll use my camera and the timer, because the quality is really good, you know, and getting better all the time. So I use that and find the little timer thing. I mean, in the olden days, I used to use my DSLR with the timer, but now that's just too fussy. So that's what I do. Let's say I'm not how does the pre-cruise communications compare for Royal Caribbean and Oceania? Royal Caribbean has sent dramatically more stuff through. They've sent a little booklet. It's a PDF booklet which just tells you which it's got your got yours in. It's got my my luggage tags to print out, sort of explanations and terms and conditions. But I mean, all of them are pretty much on, you know, online. What Royal Caribbean does have, because they have an app, their app is, particularly when on board, their app is really, really important, because, you know, the daily program is so packed. There's so much stuff going on, making bookings, and I guess they just have so many people. They want to get people to self manage their stuff. So Royal Caribbean is much more detailed, and I guess bigger line. They need to cope with people much more. So definitely the pre-communications for Royal Caribbean is way, way better. On Oceania, it's actually pretty limited, the amount of communication. And I think I've got one piece of paper eventually, which is my sort of boarding pass kind of thing, but it's much less clear. I felt I had to go and look much more. I had to go and remind myself what the dress code and stuff was. So I would say it is much better. Susan asking, will I get a chance to Kevin Snow? I think it's very unlikely, Susan. If the ship isn't full, which I am pretty sure it will be, I will sometimes ask the guest services any chances yet. So I think it's almost unlikely that I will be able to. I would love to see them. Definitely would love to see them. And you're right. They've retrofitted into all of their ships some solar cabins. Right, so we do have some more Caribbean questions, so let's get into those. Claudia, what are your top 3 Caribbean destinations and why? So I really like, particularly, I like going to some of them that are more unusual. So places like right down, Curacao, for example, Williamstadt, just because they're really far south, haven't really been to them very often, so they were kind of very different. So I really do like I like those ones, a lot. I also really like Dominica, although Dominica has become Port Air has become, and Rousseau has become a little bit more kind of aggressive. I found the vendors are become quite aggressive, but I do find that island very beautiful, and there's very good snorkeling and some very good excursions into that sort of rainforest, place. I'm just trying to think if I was going to strip out, because Curacao and Williamstown down, they're the same. I'm trying to think if I would add one on. No, I think those would be the key ones. But anyways, Kate, this is a really critical issue because I think it's getting worse, not better. How do you get past the sameness of all the Caribbean ports? And I think it's a big challenge because the Caribbean ports have blurred so much, in my view. And a lot of that is driven, I think, by the cruises. I think as a cruiser, you see it more because, the cruise ports all have your same shops. You've got your Del Sols and your Diamonds International and Tanzanite and blah, blah, blah. So they become very similar, even even the shop selling T-shirts, stuff. It's all the same, just with the name changed. And I'm probably terrible because I focus on going to the beach. So I kind of see them fairly similar. I don't spend enough time, I admit, to sort of experiment. One of the things I do, though, is I do try to understand the history much more. So one of the things I've done, which I found really, really helpful in the past, and I do it more when I'm come to the Caribbean with Mark, for example, which we will do because we were planning that region trip. We do part of the Caribbean before we go to the Panama Canal and up. Is I love doing cycle tours because I found actually one of the ways of really getting to know the places is to do the cycle tours, because the cycle tours, cycle, they'll stop, they'll explain, the history, they'll explain the agricultural there that's now largely gone, but the history of whether it's lime in Dominica or mostly it's sugar stuff. They'll also explain if there's any cultural or famous people that's come from there. And you also tend to sort of then see a bit of beach and stuff as well. So that's a little bit what I do. And I found that really helpful to get a sense of the difference. But I think you're right. There's a sense of blurring, which I think the way that we as cruise passengers, and I'm guilty of that, probably reinforce that because that's what we're expecting. The excursions are all very similar. Rhonda, we've just booked a cruise to see the Northern Lights in March 2026 with Viking. Very nice. I'm now nervous about rough seas around Norway. Do you have any cruising experience there? So you're right. At times, up in that sort of North Sea can get a little bit bumpy and rough. And I guess one of the things you were talking about is Viking did curtail one of their cruises because of bad weather and flew people back to London because they weren't going to make it back in time, as I understood it correctly. I would just embrace it. I mean, the Northern Lights is an incredible experience. It can be fairly bumpy and choppy. So I would, do the basic things. I don't know what you booked. If you booked, try and get a midship cabin as low as you can. Maybe you're too far committed now to that. So straight away, you will see a huge difference being kind of more midships because you're going to get much less motion. And I would just sort of be prepared for it. So work out what motion sickness pills work for you or whatever. But it's not going to be totally horrific. But I would just be ready and prepared, and just sort of focus on the incredibleness of the experience, because it is really important. Kind of not get it dragged. The one discussion I have with Mark, for example, is Mark read his worry as well about getting seasick, and I feel sometimes he almost gets overhyped by it. Sherry's here. Good to see you, Sherry. Arlene, on a recent Australian cruise, Aussie spoke about not tipping. Do they pay cruise gratuities as Americans, Canadians? Okay. So basically, you're right. Within Australian culture, it's not the norm to tip. So, Australians don't tip. what the cruise lines do is they build it into the fare. So, so they do pay it, but it's just not done in that same process. So what happens if you're, on an American cruise or a British kind of cruise, they'll auto add the gratuity or whatever. It's bundled into the fare. So to cover that gratuity, because gratuities is a fundamental part of cruise pay. They basically pay cruise X, knowing that they're going to be auto gratuities or gratuities of Y, and then I guess crew also hope that you tip on top of the auto gratuities. It's bundled in, so they don't physically have a line on their account which says gratuities. But if Australians are cruising outside of Australia, then that's a different situation, because normally they will pay gratuities, or what the cruise lines do when they're selling in Australia, they again do a bundled fare effectively. So it's not that they still end up paying them. It's just that it's not called out as a line. And it's a pity in many ways that we still have that ridiculous thing. But the problem is, because everyone's used, if they suddenly all fares increase. I mean, it's interesting what Celebrity did is they obviously introduced the always included, which they've now changed to always sort of included, what it's called now. But they had the gratuities included in there, and the way they effectively took a price increase is they took the gratuities out and then added them back on. So it's they basically effectively increased everyone's fares by taking gratuities out, forcing you to pay them on top. Gregory, I'm going to cruise solo on Viking Venice to Athens. That's a great itinerary. I've done that on Viking. That I went on, yeah. Were there any paid excursions that went on and recommend? So Gregory, I actually didn't really go on excursions very much on that trip because I knew most of the ports and I did a lot of self-exploring. I think in every port I went to, I'm trying to think if there's any I didn't self-explore. I think in every port I self-explored. Although maybe there's one exception to that, go to Catacomb, in which case I did the included excursion to Olympia. And if that was added on one, then that's the one I would do. Something that's far away from the port. So if there is, if Catacomb is on that itinerary, I can't remember now if it was, going to Olympia is an incredible experience. It's a little bit away and you want to go on an included tour, you can do some self-touring options. That's the one. But they had walking tours in most places, and actually saw a lot of the walking tours because when I went to, for example, Kotor, I kept bumping into the group and stuff. So the walking tours there are pretty good. Same in Split, good walking tour. Dubrovnik, they have a good walking tour. I would do the one, if you do go up on the walls, which I think was a paid for one, I would do the one where you go up on the wall. You can self-explore on the wall very easily. I think it's about about €9 or something to go on the wall. But if in Dubrovnik, because I remember seeing the walking tour around, but I can't remember if it went on the wall. I think there was a paid one. That's the one I would do. Walking around the walls in Dubrovnik is an absolute must. Let's have a look. Kathy asking the question, looking at a partial Panama Canal cruise next year on Holland America. Have you done Holland? Yes. I know Panama Canal is one of your favorites. Yes. So Kathy, I have done, I've done the Panama full transit on Queen Victoria. I've done a full transit on Oceania Marina. And I've done a partial transit on Holland America Zaandam. And then I will be doing a full transit on Regent Grandeur. So they do a really good partial. And what I would do is, if you're doing like the Zaandam or New Amsterdam or whatever, the good thing about that is that goes through the old canal. It doesn't go through the new canal. And the old canal is phenomenal. So yes, I've done it. They do it really, really well. They do it a lot. They have some great speakers on board. They really know how to do the Panama Canal. They have great excursions where once you get up to the Gatton Lake, their choice of excursions is really great. So you can do the one which is on a smaller boat, which takes you with the full transit, which is what I always recommend, because then you can do the full transit on a smaller boat. So you go through other locks, or if that doesn't appeal to you, they have some great rainforest excursions as well, where you go on the little cable thing over the canopy and stuff, which is really, really fantastic. But they do Panama Canal really, really, really well. Expat Dreamer, have you done one of the cooking classes on Regent? I haven't actually done on Regent. No, that's nonsense. I have done on Regent. What am I saying? I did it on Regent in Japan. I loved the cooking classes. Cooking classes on Regent are basically the same as the cooking classes in Oceania. The guy, and I've forgotten his name now, who was on running the cooking classes, was the one who was responsible for helping set up the cooking classes in Oceania, and he moves between the two. I really enjoyed the cooking classes. The thing I think, and the venues are beautiful. They're basically the same on Oceania and Regent. The one thing I would say with the cooking classes is they're really compiling rather than cooking classes, because basically everything's sort of prepared and you're effectively sort of like compiling the dishes. But it's really good fun. It's quite expensive. It's like, was it $70, $80 if I remember correctly? But really good fun, nice venue, really entertaining. But I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really good. I haven't actually booked to do one on Oceania, which I should do, but I'm going to look after this and see whether I can do that. Cruising Gaze, hi, good to see you here. Cruising Gaze have a YouTube channel, very active on social media. We're looking at doing a Christmas and New Year cruise on Sapphire Princess next year around the Caribbean. How was your experience being on a cruise Christmas? Full of kids. That's my only watch out. Full of kids. So I've done a couple of Christmas cruises. I've done twice on Cunard Queen Mary 2 in the Caribbean, and we did Holland America, Koningsdam out of San Diego, which was very full of kids. And that was even more so full of kids because there was fewer choices for people setting up. But what you should assume is there will be lots and lots of families on it. Now, some people sailing out of the Caribbean, sailing out of Miami and Fort Lauderdale, because there's more choice. Obviously, families got more choice, Royal Caribbean, Norwegian, Carnival, etc. So it may be a little bit less. But if you like with having lots of families, lots of multi-generational families, then that's what you should expect. So the ships will tend to be a little bit fuller because obviously lots of kids and families are sharing cabins. But it is a great experience. I mean, we booked another Christmas cruise, which we did in Regent Grandier over Christmas and we're not on for New Year. So it's really good fun, but the ships are full, they're busy. So the thing with Holland America is there was always long queues for the dining room stuff. So if there's any things that you want to do, so if you want to push the boat out and go in like a suite, which gets you a little bit more suite dining, if that's possible, just to work away around the cruise. But it's really good fun. The ports obviously are busy, but all the ports are always busy. So that would be fun. Richard, I'm going to direct you more towards my video because I should dive into this in quite a lot of detail. So what are the top places in Japan you should consider for a visit on Japan cruise? Of all the places, how many can you self-tour without booking a cruise short tour? So Richard, have a look on if you go to my channel, look at the search button and look Japan. I just have one Japan video and I dive into that in quite a lot of detail. So I talk about the places, I talk about the big risk when booking excursions, how people make the mistakes of seeing the same thing over and over again, so getting the diversity. I do have a whole section about self-touring, and pretty much most places you can self-tour. However, what I would do, Richard, as you're looking at your itinerary is look at how far away places are, because many of the sites you want to see are quite far away. So actually it's better to go on a tour. The biggest of those is if you're going and you're either in Osaka or Kobe, which are the two ports they use for Kyoto, for example. You kind of want to do a tour because it's quite far away. Have a look at that video. If you've got more questions, then drop me a line and I'm more than happy to answer it. I know it does work quite well because a friend of Mark's, a work colleague of Mark's, is going to Japan. They had many of the same questions and they watched the video and said that it really helped. So Sharon making the point with the upgrade, I can't remember when I booked if I did you're right, they might have had that upgrade. A bit like I just booked that Regent Navigator trip that I just booked that I mentioned earlier, going from Barcelona to down to Africa. They were doing the 2-category promotion, but on that I booked a concierge cabin on that Navigator one. But maybe when I booked the Oceania, they did have the promotion. I booked Vista a really long time ago, So I can't remember. KB in the UK, why did you choose Miami over Fort Lauderdale for your pre-cruise? Good question. I prefer Miami as a place. I really like Miami. I think there's more things to do. I like going to South Beach, which is interesting because it's quite, well, actually it wasn't that busy. It's sort of spring break, but maybe the spring break is I was only come out at night, I guess, and party. So I just prefer Miami. Also because when you fly into Miami, so it's actually just quick, it's a half hour and you're in the hotel and stuff. Saying that, when I come back in April, in a month's time to do for my group cruise, I'm going to stay in Fort Lauderdale because it's departing from there. But it's only like 40 minutes or whatever up the road from here in an Uber or whatever. Oops, sorry, I just dropped my mouse. So just I like Miami. So but I will be staying in Fort Lauderdale before the group cruise. So it's more just I like Miami. So that's no big reason. I have stayed in Fort Lauderdale a couple of times. I've actually never found a hotel that I really like in Fort Lauderdale. So I'm trying to remember what I stayed at. I've stayed at the last couple of times. So I don't always stay in Miami. I sometimes stay in Fort Lauderdale. Champagne and cruising. Would you ever consider retrying Pinot, and given it was much FYK? I'm not sure what that last bit means. Would I consider Pinot? Possibly. I keep thinking I might do. I feel like I should try some of their new ships because I haven't been on their 2 new ships. But I don't have a big passion about it. I just feel like there's so many better cruise lines than Pinot around, and so many more options and lines that I haven't been on that I want to try. So that's really why they fall down. That I don't have a big draw to go back and try them because there's many other lines that I want to try. But I should. So it's not high on my list. I do have it on my list. I have a list of things, but it's quite low on the list. Michael, either, to be honest. I've done both. I've done Princess and I've done Honor America. Both of those lines obviously are Honor America has been in Alaska longer than Princess. Honor America 75 years, Princess now 50 years, both over now because I think 75 and 50 was a couple of years ago. They're both going to Glacier Bay. They both kind of have grandfathered rights in there. They both know the region very well. They both have good speakers, etc. They both have lots of families when it's on the Alaska season. So I've found, if you're looking for a more adult experience, you'll find both are busy with families. So one's not more adult than the other, although historically they would be. So I don't have a preference. I'm going back to Alaska this year, and I'm actually going on Viking because I decided I want to go back as an adult experience. I went on Princess in June last year and the year before last, and it was just the kids just completely took over the pool. Not that you want to go to Alaska pool, and this was a little bit crazy busy. So I thought I'm actually going to go back and do because I also want to go back and try Viking. So I just decided that way around. But I think both are very, very similar. There. Star of the Seas, thank you. I nearly said Star when I was trying to remember what it was called. Calling all ports, what's your favorite sea day activity? The problem with sea days is, to be honest, I often, that's a day when I use catch up to film. My favorite sea day activity is actually, it's a good day to catch lots of activities because there's lots of activities on. In reality, my favorite activity is actually, other than that, is I actually find it quite a good day to just chill and relax, often then go to the gym. If they have afternoon tea, go to afternoon tea. So it's sort of that kind of combination of, it's a good day for getting work done, some gym done, compensate with afternoon tea sort of stuff. Timothy, this is a massive question. I actually do cover this in a video, but how would you compare Honor America with other premium cruise lines? So I actually, so in that category, you've got Honor America, you've got Celebrity, you've got Princess, you've got Cunard, and you've got Disney are sort of the big ones. I mean, Honor America, of those, is one of my favorites. I really like Honor America. Celebrity and Honor America are the two that probably I like the most. Celebrity is the one that's trying to be more youthful. with their new H-class ships, they're trying to position themselves even more luxury, so they tend to be a little bit more costly. I like the balance that Horror America has. I do like the new Pinnacle class ships. I like, I think the cabins are great. I like the emphasis on music, although they are, with some of the changes, the contract with Lincoln Center stage is finished. They don't have quite the full musical, but I do like the music walk experience. The shows are so-so. I think the shows are weakest of them all, but I just like their sort of focus on, I think they're very good at destinations. I think their food's pretty good, with Rudy Soderman sorting out their food, and they're not crazy price. I think they're quite a good combination in terms of the overall kind of value, the value mix. Quick question on tipping. How does tipping work on cruises without auto gratuities? Do you tip your waiter staff as you interact with them, or do you get a gratuity at the end? So my thing's going on, try that's doing that. So basically, all cruise lines will auto add unless, well, there's a couple of ways it works. So there's no cruise line, if any, no, let me start again. So if gratuities are not included in the fare, they will be auto added. So if you're going on, a Regent or a Silver Sea or P&O that we were talking about earlier, or cruise lines that include gratuities within the fare, then should be no expectation that you interact. You should be tipping anybody theoretically. If a line doesn't include gratuities, they will auto add them. Gone are the days when they used to give the option that they all will auto add. So you won't find any, I'm sure there's probably an exception somewhere. So you won't find any that doesn't auto add. So if something included, it will be added. You don't do it as you interact with them. Some people like to give the barman some tips, but bear in mind that if you're buying drinks if you're buying drinks and you've got a drinks package, gratuities will be added. If you're buying drinks one by one, gratuities of 80% added, the spa will be added. So normally what most people do at the end of the cruise, the day before, they would tip people that they wanted to tip. So, if you've had the same waiter or your cabin steward or whatever. So, so the only time they're not auto added if they've already paid, then there's no expectation really to do that. Jen asking, do you have a video of Virgin Cruises? I've got 2 videos of Virgin Cruises there. Right, so we have churned through the time. Thanks so much, particularly if you're in the UK and join us really late. I'm really impressed. Hopefully this time worked for people in the US. So what I'll try and do when I'm back, like in April, I'll try and do some more on this time zone. Let's talk about next week. So next week, I will be on Saturday, I will be changing ships. Sunday, I'll be on Oceania. They have Starlink. I will try and run a live stream off Oceania next Sunday, so keep an eye out for that. I will do some tests on the Saturday, so I will sort of schedule one and I will confirm if that's going to happen. So hopefully that will happen. So anyway, I'm off on Symphony of the Seas tomorrow. If you're going cruising, have a great time. Thanks so much for joining me. Enjoy the rest of your weekend and stay safe.